So today we're here because we want to dispel some myths and better explain some things that we could have done a better job of explaining in the patron-client chapter of the book. And specifically it was called Forget Mentors, Find a Patron. And there were some things that we've gotten little criticisms about, which we actually love because we get to better explain what we're talking about. But I wanted to ask my dad some questions today, just to clarify it and go through everything, because he's the one who wrote the chapter. He's the one who spent all the time thinking about it. So I have about 10 questions for you.
Okay, let's do it.
Why would we use Peter Thiel, the guy who's doing talks on the Antichrist, and J.D. Vance as an example of a patron-client relationship in the book?
Well, I picked them because they're contemporary. Like, you can look around right now, rather than using just historical figures to talk about the way things were done in the past. I mean, I think they are a current example of this relationship done well. Even if you don't like when they get together, what they do, then there's still a great contemporary example you can look around and really see, and you can see it evolve over time also, which I think will be interesting.
Would you say that Socrates and Plato had kind of a patron-client relationship in some ways?
Yeah, definitely in some ways. Yeah.
But you wouldn't want to use that because that was thousands of years ago. It's not even relevant to people now.
Yeah, and also you could talk. We do talk about historical examples with Caesar, for example, in the book. The problem is we can't really dissect it and see it in real time, how it really applied to the modern era, because with Caesar, the example was a familial ties really that were part of the motivation for his connections. So anyway, this is a real example of people that didn't know each other before, who met each other along the way. I'm talking about J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, and how Peter Thiel served as J.D.'s patron, and how J.D. has been a great client for Peter Thiel, and both advancing mutually beneficial causes, including getting J.D. Vance in the VP role.
Right. So it's not about, we're not choosing them as an example because of their character, for example. It's just a modern day example that is good to use.
Yeah, some people will like them and other people will not like them, but the model of them is great. It's a perfect example of the symbiosis that can develop in these relationships, and how it can push both to higher levels of success.
So the word patron comes from the Latin root, which leads to pater, meaning father. But some think that the root word is more about male dominance. That's a criticism we've had. What do you think about that?
I don't think of father figures being as male dominant. Of course, they're male, but they're just fulfilling the fatherly role where, like in ancient Rome, there was, one of the deals between the patron and client is that the client would fall under the patron's protection. It'd be like, he's with me now, don't mess with him. And so that's kind of a fatherly sort of thing, I think it works. It has nothing to do with the patriarchy or dominance or any of those things. I know that's some of the other issues we've heard about, conflict, or taking advantage of others too. We'll get into that, I think.
Right. So we've heard that some believe that clients will naturally exploit patrons and use them as stepping stones to amass power. Do you think that the patron-client relationship does lead down that road?
It's supposed to be a mutually beneficial relationship, like all real relationships in life. So what we do in this chapter is we're trying to contrast this patron-client model versus a traditional mentor model. And in the traditional mentor model, it's a one-way street. Like, the mentee receives, hopefully there's a Gandalf-like figure that shows up with the answers about what you need to do, and you just receive the benefits. But it doesn't really work in the real world. And instead, what has to be, like all relationships, mutually beneficial. So now it's certainly possible that you could have a client or a would-be client or mentee who is acting in bad faith, really just trying to use you to get to some further stepping stone or get to another person or get access to capital or whatever. It's quite possible that could occur, but these relationships, like all of them, they evolve naturally. So the patron wouldn't expose their full reputation and their wealth or whatever to an unknown entity. So the relationship gets built over time. Trust gets built, and then, more mutual collaboration happens.
So, what are some of the other big differences between a mentor-mentee relationship and the patron-client relationship, just so that we can make it clear?
Okay, so the biggest differences is that the mentor one is a one-way street, and number two is that there's this idea that the mentee doesn't bring anything to the table. And I think in this, the point we really try and clearly make is that the client or mentee has the ability and has the responsibility to bring something substantial to the table, to be a worthy client, to make themselves useful to the lives of the patron in order to expect some reciprocity in return. So
right.
It's about, basically, you're like a victim of a good mentor in a good way or a bad way in the mentee model. In the patron-client model, you're an active participant in the relationship.
But something else that and part of the criticism that we've gotten is comparing and contrasting the patron-client model that you've proposed with the master and apprentice model, and viewing that in a oddly good and positive light. Of course, there's good things about it, but traditionally, it wasn't as pleasant for everyone. Like Ben Franklin is a great example.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, the truth is that the best way to actually learn something is to apprentice under somebody who actually has the skill.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea is really great. And it's kind of like the idea of mentorship being really great, but the realities of the way apprenticeships really worked in the past is that it was indentured servitude. I mean, you were effectively sold by your parents into the trade. Benjamin Franklin famously ran away from, it was his brother he was apprenticed to, and who also beat him, apparently, and he ran away
right.
from him. But he's not alone. So there are many cases like that. Now, he did learn the print trade from his brother, though.
That's true. That's true. That's true. But there's lots of cases. I remember it was somebody like Wild Bill Hickok or something like that, where they were living in the East, apprenticed unwillingly to a man much older than him, and then he got out there, he escaped.
Yeah.
So many stories like that, because you're just forced to be there for years.
Right. I mean, that's not really a real relationship. Obviously, relationships should be mutually beneficial and voluntary on both parties. And so, with these, the patron-client, you don't really know how far you can take it. I think this example of Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance is great because obviously it's been taken really far. Not only did certainly the relationship help with J.D. Vance getting this #1 book published, that was then optioned for a film by Ron Howard. I mean, this is not your normal track, right? But then ultimately comes the vice president out of it, and who knows where it'll end, actually. And of course, as you read in the book, Peter Thiel gets certain things out of this too. I mean, that are mutually beneficial for them. So it could go potentially that far, or it could be something, voluntarily, it's not as deep. It doesn't go to that level of success or that level of commitment to each other, that this one did. So it's voluntary the whole way.
See.
But the thing is, both of them are trying to add value.
So this is something we've heard as well. Doesn't the patron-client model foster fragility because of its natural hierarchy of the patron being at the top above the client?
Yeah, this is the people who have a problem with hierarchy in society, I think, have a problem with this. And I agree, artificial hierarchy is bad because it's bureaucratic. It's it kills energy and dynamism versus, systems that are naturally hierarchic simply because one chooses to defer to another because the apprentice might recognize that the master has something to teach, so there's a natural deference and not a subjugation. There's
something different in going, oh, this guy knows more than me. I'd like to be under him.
Yeah, and it starts with, if as a client or a would-be mentee again, if you admire the patron, that's a great starting basis. You admire what they've done and who they are, and so that creates the basis of automatically a weird hierarchy. But if you admire, then you're holding up as higher than yourself, the other party.
And this is how you begin to choose a patron. Right.
That's where I would start, is with people that you admire in your inner circle. We have people that you might know through friends or family or have met along the way. As J.D. Vance coincidentally met Peter Thiel in law school. And, then that weird connection, or that time of meeting, as Peter Thiel was a guest lecturer for a limited period of time to a limited set of students, that chance meeting evolved into much, much more. So, but obviously I'm sure JD knew well in advance what Peter Thiel was and what he was about and what his ideas were, and probably looked at it as an opportunity, to get in front of him and demonstrate that he was worthy.
It seems like JD already fit what Thiel was looking for, though. So it was easier to begin that relationship in the first place, right?
Yeah, well, it turns out, this is the way that Peter Thiel was making himself available to the open public, really was through these through this class structure, for instance. The only reason why someone like him, who has unlimited means and access to anything, the only rational justification, I think, for him doing something like that is that it gives him access to new people with new ideas that he wants, but he wants it kind of controlled because it can get out of hand. So, yeah, we get into how all this can be done tactically. If you're looking to link up with a good patron, how exactly to do it. We actually articulate that in some detail in the chapter. But essentially, their relationship is a great example of it, I have to say.
So with that relationship being kind of more easily started because JD fit what Thiel wanted, how would someone, just in a brief explanation, become the type of person that their ideal patron would choose as a client?
So you find someone you admire, would be step one. Mm-hmm. Then the next step is, what problems does this person have in the world? What are they trying to accomplish? Studying them as much as you can, or asking them questions if you can, to try and understand what their challenges are. Like, how to figure out ultimately how you might be of service to their interests, if not to them directly. And so it's like, once you discover what they're trying to accomplish, and I think again, this is speculation a lot of it's not reported exactly what happened with J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, but I think Thiel's objectives were pretty well known and understood by JD. As his political objectives, if he gotten involved with the Trump campaign in 2016, was one of the few tech people that came out and supported Trump. So he was becoming politically involved, and so you could see what his objectives were based upon what he'd been doing, essentially. And so knowing that, if I were JD in that position, and I admired Peter, I would look at it and go, okay, here's how I think I might be useful to you. Or I understand you're interested in this. Have you thought about, you're just trying to express to them as much as you can with the limited time you have, that you understand, you think what they're about, and that you have some ideas.
So let's say you were 18 again, and you knew everything you know now, and you happen to stumble into Doug in the same way you stumbled into him. How long ago now?
18 years ago.
18 years ago in Argentina. Is there anything you would have done differently to build your relationship with him?
Well, I wouldn't have made a fool out of myself when I first met him, because I met him, I've talked about this at other places, but I met him, just totally serendipitously as I was coming out of the hotel, and he was walking down the sidewalk. And I've never had this response with a celebrity before. I've met him, I don't care. But I was like, holy shit, Doug Casey, you're my hero. That's literally what I said. And just a few minutes, maybe moments, I realized what a fool I was making myself, and got together and gathered myself and apologized profusely, and tried to encourage him to go on his way. But then we moved down to Argentina when you were just like this big.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting reintroduced to him, which is a better way to meet a patron, by the way, to be introduced to them, which we talk about this in the book too. And then, what I did really was I was a fan of Doug already. I already knew what he believed, and it had really changed the way I understood the world too. I was by just reading his work. But I looked for a way I might be useful. And, part of it was, the first big thing, I guess, was in a meeting with a few of us together. Doug said, hey, I got an invitation from the president of Palau, this Pacific Island country, to go and talk to him. Who wants to go with? And there were like 3 or 4 of us there. And I was like, me? Yeah. I didn't even know really what or where Palau was when he said it, but I'm like, I'm up for it. And then I tried to make myself as useful as I could to him on that trip, on the couple of trips we made out there, actually.
See? And so nothing would have changed except the first interaction.
Nothing would have changed. Nothing would have changed. And I think Doug acts like he doesn't remember the first interaction. I don't know if that's to save me the embarrassment of it, or but I brought it up with him many times, So, but the truth is that if you're somewhat famous at all, you don't remember all the people you meet that just randomly run into you. And so this is why being introduced makes such a big difference. And there are ways to get introduced, and we talk about this in the book more about strategically how to look at it and how to find the patron and meet them and all that. But
right.
Yeah, I wouldn't do anything. The core thing is how do you add value? Like, how do you be useful? How do you make them want you around? And of course, it's not about manipulating them or anything like that. It's about going, as I understand it, this is a problem you want to solve. This is something you need help with, and I think I can help in this way. And it's just and for the benefit for me at first was that I got to be around Doug, which that alone, that's all I wanted, was to be around, because I was learning, someone I admired, and I could learn, I could ask him questions, and I could learn more about, anything I wanted really from him, because it was a vast experience. So
what were some of the other huge benefits you got from that, and what benefits did you think you rendered to Doug?
I think the biggest benefit I've got from it is an intellectual mentor. I don't think I've gotten really real world, materialistic benefits out of it. We did start a couple businesses together, so arguably you could say there, obviously co-wrote this book with him, so that there's some, that's material. Yeah. But yeah, it was really just an intellectual mentor, somebody that could really learn how he thought and learn what was really his ideas that were really useful to me, and be able to ask somebody who had lots of experience and was very objective and just an excellent thinker lots of questions, which has made me really happy to do that. From his standpoint, there's been a lot of things. I happened to be in a position later to buy his publishing company, as I was running much larger publishing company, and so that accrued real material benefit to him for us to do that. There's a couple businesses we've started basically were things he wanted to see happen. They weren't things that I got benefit from, but weren't things that I wanted to see done. But they were things he wanted done. And the book is, of course,
one of those things.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's just a perfect example of how a successful patron-client relationship can work.
Right. Because Doug first brought up writing the book 12 years before we actually finally did. And it didn't fit for me then. I had no interest. It didn't make any sense. And it wasn't until a longer later when, you got to that stage that I was like, this is a problem that we need to do something about, that it made sense, or again, it was for mutual benefit. We could work on it.
One last question for you, Dad. Should you only have one patron?
If you find one that really works, I doubt that JD has really others.
Anyone that could beat Peter Thiel?
Not only that, but where he's basically hitched his wagon to that much. And, certainly I'd say that, the way my relationship is with Doug, haven't looked at it, I don't have any other person I would consider a patron. But, when you're starting out, I think that, you are trying to see where these relationships are naturally going to evolve. So it's, you don't really know. You might find out that, you get to a certain stage where there's mutual respect, but there's really not any mutual benefit to really take it to the next level.
Right. With
one, but where there's another where it does naturally sync better. There's maybe a better chemistry between you or whatever, better and better mutual interests, overlap that you can take advantage of it more. So I think if you're young and starting out, find people you admire and try and be useful to them. I would say be the general rule, and then the relationships will evolve naturally from there. I think on the other side, the patron-client one, going that direction, should you only have one client? No, absolutely not. But some of them are going to be closer than others. And I think there's probably a whole bunch of people that might, that certainly would consider Doug a mentor. And then there are various stages of that mentorship, where they're, maybe, I think my relationship's probably closest with them among people, but not say, but actually John Hunt, I would say is equal or even higher than I am if there's a hierarchy in patron-client relationship with Doug.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
you should have, as a patron, you really want to have a lot of clients. But again, because they're a, what do you call it, a force multiplier.
Right. Because if they have your interests in mind as well, it's like you can compound your.
And usually, as you get older, you have you have no opportunities. It seems like when you're really young, just starting off. So you have to say yes to almost everything. And actually, you should say yes to almost everything. As you get older, you have to say no to almost everything, because you just can't. The last thing you need is another opportunity. You've got enough opportunities. In fact, the only way to really take best advantage of it is to narrow your focus. So, like a successful person of a generation older than you is going to have really what would be considered table scraps for them of opportunities that would be like huge gold nuggets for you. So, if you have a lot of clients, a lot of people who can take advantage of these things that are interesting to you, but not worth your deep energy and focus on, they can pick up the ball and run with them, and you can get things done you never would have gotten done otherwise, like Doug in this book. So,
Right.
Another example.
Okay, one last question. So let's say for the young men who go through the preparation and are very busy, going through all the cycles nonstop and traveling all over the place, let's say they do find someone they think will be a good patron, and a relationship starts. How can they keep that up even while being incredibly busy in some cases?
You have to prioritize the relationship in some way, and one would be, with you want to keep up to date on what they're doing. Obviously, if they are somebody as a minor public profile of any kind, being aware of what they're doing and looking for ways you can help along the way. If they're traveling to a place that you've been, you can maybe offer to connect them with other interesting people you met there. But just being aware of what's going on with them, and then making the effort to reach out occasionally and to make sure they understand what you're doing, and and that you are aware of what they're doing, and that just work the basic things about keeping in touch to try and.
In any kind of relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like a patron-client relationship is just more, at least in your mind, in the client's mind, reading this book, a more formalized relationship, and it takes the course of how most relationships should take anyway.
I think by articulating it the way we did, the goal is to just have people think about this relationship as being valuable, this intergenerational relationship that starts first based upon admiration and an effort to create value. And that if they with that model of how these relationships work, then they will have their eyes open, I think, to the world differently. And when they encounter someone they admire, they'll approach the relationship differently, and they won't waste it or squander those opportunities that come their way.
See. All right. Well, thanks, Dad. I appreciate it. It was good to talk about this, because we actually do love the negative feedback we get about things, and we got a fair amount from some people on this chapter in the book. So if you have any negative feedback for us,
We want it. Give it to us.
100%. The positive feedback is fantastic. Of course, we love it. It's encouraging. But the negative feedback is where we can really dig deep into stuff and solidify some of these things. So,
Yeah, we love it. Feedback's good. Feedback's how you get better.
anyway, thank you guys very much, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks.